So I guess many of you are a lot smarter than me in my younger days. If you have a job, you know what you're doing, you know what you're contributing, and you see the big picture. You are a lot smarter than me. And you are not alienated from the product of your own labor. You see the big picture. And you are not alienated from the process of your own labor. You know what you are doing. All these little steps or little tests. And you told me you don't really face competitions from coworkers. So you are not alienated from others. And you still have a sense of identity even though you have a part-time job. You are smarter than me. So I told you, when I was an accountant in Malaysia, when I was in my early 20s, I was alienated from my own work. I think I felt that. I did not know why. I have to compare two accounts and check each item, whether they are both in the same account or that item only appears in one account and not the others, and I had to investigate and research. I did not know why I did that. Because of that, it shows that I was alienated from the process of my own labor. I did not know why I had to compare two accounts, compare each transaction in these two accounts. If they both appear in two accounts, we are fine. If only one shows up, that transaction only shows up in one account, then I had to investigate. That's part of accounts reconciliation. But I did not see the big picture while doing accounts reconciliations at my old company. I did not realize that accounts reconciliations was and is still important because management relies on accounts reconciliation to make sure that everything is done correctly to prevent fraud. Because if a transaction only shows up in one account, hasn't shown up in another account for long periods of time, then something is going on. Either that bank, maybe they were a bit slow in processing the transaction, or they needed more time to do investigation before they let the payment, the wire through, so that the wire will not go into a customer's account. Even if there's a fraud, the customer closes the account and the bank loses money. So that's the big picture. I did not see it. So I was also alienated from the product of my own labor. I did not see that actually accounts reconciliation was important for the profits of the company to prevent fraud, among other things. And wow, I felt resented because, oh, the management or even my immediate boss, yeah, whenever something goes wrong, they blame us. They yell at us in front of everybody. And when something is right, they took all the credit. They did not give any credit to the reconciliation department. So I was alienated from the product of my labor. And I also told you on Monday, I was alienated from others. I faced competition from my ex-colleague because we were given different accounts from different foreign agents. Some were given Chase Bank, some were given Citibank, some were given Barclays from UK, some were given Deutsche Bank, some were given a bank from Japan, some were given a bank in Shanghai from China. And we were always competing with one another to see whose reconciliation looked the best. So I was also alienated from others, my co-workers at that time. And yeah, because of all these kinds of alienation, I think I was also alienated from my own identity, my sense of self, because I lose touch with the work I did. I mean, now looking back, I appreciated that, but it's too late. I major in sociology and now I'm a professor. Because in my 20s, maybe who knows, sometimes our mindsets are different. When we are in our 20s, our 30s, our 40s, and our 50s, maybe in my younger days, I think differently. And those days, when I took a course in sociology as a general education requirement in college, yeah, it seems more interesting than accounting. So the sociology department offered me a TA. I took it and I left. So that's the meaning of alienation. You need to know the definition, not the different kinds of alienation, but this definition for your midterm. Are we clear? Okay. Sorry to go off a tangent. And those were my crazy days in my younger self. So, let's talk about something else. Uber drivers. Can people make additional cash by driving Ubers or Lyft? Can people make more money by driving Lyft or driving Ubers? Yes? Why yes?
Like they get paid to do it.
They
You
get
have to
paid.
do it like often because
Mm-hmm.
like if it depends on like how far you're driving people because like gas prices might catch up to you and like repair costs on your car. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean ultimately, if you're doing it, you should be making more money. You should be making at least some sort of profit.
Mm-hmm.
So
Depends on where you are driving, how you are driving. You don't pick customer from this end and you take the next customer all the way at the end of that town. Then you may not make money. It can cost you a lot in gas. And depends on the type of customer you have, how they tip or whatnot. Depends on many factors. And so, you think Uber drivers can still make money if they do it right? Okay. Have you consulted Dr. Google? Did you see any YouTube channels talking about driving Ubers, whether it's a good idea or not, or driving Lyft? Okay. This guy, his YouTube name is called Beat the Bush. Yeah, that's his YouTube name, this guy. And he was an engineer. He has a master's in electrical engineering from UCLA. And he worked for several years as an engineer, drawing six figures income, according to his YouTube. And at some point, he quit his job to become a full-time YouTuber. And that's what he said, the same thing like what you just told me. You need to strategize while driving Uber. If not, the car maintenance, the gas prices you have to pay may be more than what you make driving Uber, whether as a primary or as a secondary job. I'm sure there are many YouTubers who create videos like this. He actually had a spreadsheet calculating. He also drove Ubers for a while just for fun. I don't think he needed the money. Just to experiment whether one can make money driving Uber or not. And that's what he said, like what you just told me. You got to strategize. You pick up one customer after the next, maybe within the same location, in order to survive driving Ubers. So, do you think it's a good job driving Ubers? Why not? You have the freedom. You don't have to work at the company. You don't have to clock in and clock out within designated time. No, you don't really have a boss. You are your own boss. even though it's not easy? Why not?
I don't know, it just doesn't seem like the payout is very good. Like any job where you have to like drive your own car for
Mhm.
something, like even for like a delivery service
Mm-hmm.
or something like that, there's always the possibility that your car could break down. And you just have to like you get more miles on your car, especially if you live in like a bigger city. You're gonna be
Mhm.
driving a lot more, paying for more gas.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't have a very efficient car, if you have an older car, like it has a more like it has a better probability of breaking down and you
Mhm.
have to repair it. I don't know, it just doesn't seem like an ideal job.
That's
Okay.
I feel like because of how easy you could like
Mhm.
become one, there's gonna be a lot of people who are that, who are Uber drivers, so you have a lot of competition right there.
Mm-hmm. So Uber drivers may be alienated in some ways. Who knows? So do you think it's fair to Uber drivers who reap the giant share of the profit? They work for a company, right? Uber and Lyft. So do you think it's fair to them? Do you think the company is fair to them? The companies, do you think they are fair to their drivers? Do you think?
I mean, if a lot of people do it, then they
Mhm.
must. If a lot of people do drive for like Uber and Lyft, so I mean, there's got to be some reward for it. Like, there's got to be something that they're doing right to get people to drive for them.
Do you think Uber drivers are compensated for their hard work, their effort? Do you think Uber drivers or Lyft drivers are compensated fairly, adequately for what they are doing, driving around for their hard work all day, from dawn to dusk?
I don't know what they get paid, but probably it's not too straining and
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of freedom.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know, like how much they get paid or what benefits they get or something like that. Is I don't know, like especially if you're in a big city, like if you're driving around all the time, there's more
Mm-hmm.
like probability to get in like an accident or something like that. So you could like get really hurt or even die just by driving around a big city, just by probability.
So we are not sure whether they get retirement and benefits or not if they are full time. I have a feeling most of them are part time. And so because of that, some YouTube channels, when they do a channel about Uber or Lyft drivers, they say that all these drivers, you don't have to agree with me, they are being shortchanged, taken advantage of by their own employers. These kind of jobs sometimes target people who wants a second income, but maybe they don't know basic math. They don't know how to strategize. They'll pick on any customer that shows up on their phone or whatnot. They don't know how to strategize properly. So, because of that, they may have to spend more on car maintenance, on gas and whatnot. They are not really making a profit. And because of that, the conflict theory can also be used to explain the situations of Uber and Lyft drivers. According to some YouTubers, they are not sociologists. Many of them are engineers or maybe accountants, or they are in other professions. They just create a video and talk about whether driving Lyft or Uber is profitable. And from what they describe in all these YouTube channels, it seems to me that if company really target all these people, the same for delivery person who doesn't know how to calculate and who has no sense of doing a proper budget, who cannot figure things out. They target all these people as employees and they hire them. And they give them a notion that, oh, you can make a second income driving Uber, driving Lyft. doing delivery on the side. If that's really the case, then all these drivers and delivery persons initially will have a false consciousness. They actually thought they were making more money. They did not factor in car maintenance if they are using their beat up car for this second income. The car may not last very long. They may need to spend more money to buy another car soon. Or if they pick up customer far apart, they are going to spend a lot on gas prices. They are not making any money doing this gig. If that's really the case, then they may have a false consciousness until maybe they sit down in their living room, start calculating. Oh, then maybe it dawned on them, it's not worth it. I'm going to do something else. Maybe I'm going to have a YouTube channel to talk about my my Uber driving experience. Oh, to make people aware of the pros and cons. Oh, it's more profitable that way. So that's the meaning of false consciousness. And it's not very different from the workers in the factory in 19th century in Europe. Maybe initially they did not realize they were being shortchanged to some degree by their supervisors, their employers, the owners of the factory who own everything. They did not realize that maybe their bosses live a different lifestyle. Or they did not realize that they might not be paid fairly for their hard work and their labor. People in those assembly plants in the 19th century during Industrial Revolution. So, in my humble opinion, you don't have to agree. I think the notion of false consciousness is still applicable in today's society. And we've been through this before too. I told you, several restaurants in downtown, right? They pay people way below minimum wage. Okay, do you think the waiter and waitress realized they were being underpaid? The restaurants in Kearney, in downtown, I think they do. But they live on tips, right? They rely on tips. So, maybe the notion or the concept of false consciousness do not apply to restaurant workers in downtown. But just my 2 cents, you don't need to agree. This notion of still applies to Uber and Lyft drivers. Some of them, not all. They are not realizing, maybe some of these drivers, that their employers may not have their best interests in mind. I think my 2 cents, you don't need to agree. If the owners of Uber and Lyft have the employees' best interest in mind, the drivers' best interest in mind, the companies could have compensated the drivers more. So, I believe that false consciousness is still applicable to this driver's life. You don't need to agree. Just know the definition. So, class consciousness. We also talked about class consciousness many weeks ago. So, when the workers, 19th century workers in the factory floor, they realized the employers, the supervisors did not have their best interest in mind. They were being shortchanged or taken advantage of to some degree. When they realized that they are not being fairly compensated. This is what we mean by class consciousness. These factory workers, they gain a sense of class consciousness when they start to realize that the owners of the factory did not have their best interest in mind. They did not compensate them fairly for their hard work and effort. That's what we mean by class consciousness. Are we clear? And The class consciousness concept is also applicable in today's society. Maybe some Uber drivers or the previous Lyft drivers, some of them may have realized when they are calculating things and they stop doing that. Maybe they have a YouTube channel instead and talk about the pros and cons they experience and whatnot, and they make money that way. It could be a better second income, who knows? So make sure you know the difference between these two kinds of consciousness. Are we clear? Okay. We also talk about symbolic interactionism theory. And this is a bottom-up approach, right? Through interactions among different people in a different society, sometimes we attach our own subjective meanings to all these symbols. These symbols can be an event, a currency, other gadgets. When we attach agreed upon meanings to all these symbols, this is how we build the economic system up. When we all agree, dealing with that piece of paper or that piece of plastic, that this is a legit means of exchange, we are essentially contributing to building the economic system up when everybody interacts with that piece of plastic or that piece of paper. So this is what we mean by symbolic interactionism theory. Are we clear? And the first chapter did not talk about another concept related to symbolic interactionism. We need to know what is rationalization. A rational society is a society that is built around logic, efficiency. And that's the reason why sometimes, even from kindergarten until now, your teachers and professors, we have to give you a grade for everything you do. Oh, you are even graded for your attendance, how many % you attended. Because guess what? We have to report to the registrar. That's a manifestation of the process of rationalization. I'm sure you experienced that when you call customer service for any issue, at the end of the call, sometimes you have to fill out the survey, right? Why is that so? They want to see how good or how bad the customer service is rendered by that individual, right? So you had to fill out the survey every time they end the call. That's another manifestation of the process of rationalization. Maybe the top guns of any organization, companies included, they figure this is a very efficient and logical way to assess our customer service rep. Let's do it. And after you get your degree, when you go to any organization to work, you always have performance review. That's another manifestation of the process of rationalization. Because apparently the top guns in your company think that this is a very logical way to assess how you're doing in that company from this time to this time. Are we clear about this concept? And even in some factories, they are being paid, the workers in assembly lines are being paid by how many shoes they make, how many clothes they make, how many things they make. That's another manifestation of the process of rationalization. So the process of rationalization is ongoing in our daily life, in our society, in any society we live in. We just take it for granted. Are we clear? Question? Okay. When this process is taken into extreme, when people overly focus on logic and efficiency, This can result in a phenomenon we call the iron cage. We are trapped by the bureaucratic system. That is what we mean by the iron cage. And sometimes, I'm sure you realize in your high school or middle school or elementary school, sometimes or many times, teachers may want to be more creative in their teaching styles, but because they are being assessed in a given way through different accountability measures in the school system, they cannot be as creative as they want to. Or they cannot teach in another way. They have to give certain assignments to fulfill certain accountability criteria. That's a manifestation of the iron cage phenomena, where we are being trapped within the existing bureaucratic system. Yeah, I wish I don't have to take attendance, but I have to report to the registrar from time to time. Another manifestation of the iron cage. And sometimes when we call customer rep, can you predict what they are going to say when you call customer rep? Are their actions predictable? Can you predict how they are going to greet you? What they are going to say next? Can you predict? When you call customer rep with an issue, sometimes we can, not always, but sometimes. So if we can predict what they are going to say to us, first thing they greet us, and then they say how can they help us, right? And they let us talk about our issue. And we can also predict how they are going to end the call, and sometimes they mention the survey. So this is another manifestation that sometimes these customer service reps, they may be trapped within the bureaucratic systems of their own company. They had to do it this way. They cannot greet their customer when they pick up the phone in a different way. Make sure you understand the concept of the iron cage. Any questions so far? So, after you graduate, when you go to work in any organization, sometimes you have to do things a certain way. There are certain procedures for different tests. This is another manifestation of the iron cage. Are we clear? I think I've given you ample examples. If you're not clear, email me. Okay. There's a new term called habitualization. Habitualization means when actions and behaviors, when they are repeated over and over and over, it forms a pattern. We call that pattern habitualization. And because of that, you can predict what your teacher or professor is going to do before class starts. The professor or teacher will do housekeeping before he or she starts lecturing, or do housekeeping, then take rows, then lecture, then end the class. And sometimes we can predict what customer reps are going to say. This is another manifestation of habitualization, when their actions are repeated over and over and over again. It forms a pattern. We call this pattern habitualization. When you go to a doctor, the patient-doctor interaction can also form a pattern. Different patients interact with different doctors in almost similar manners, right? This is another manifestation of habitualization. Are we clear? And when all these actions, they form a pattern, they not only stop there, but conventional norms are also implanted in all this action to the point that it becomes a norm. We call this the process of institutionalization. When all these actions form a pattern, becomes a normal part of society, becomes a convention in any society, then we can say that this action has been institutionalized. So, because maybe the European immigrants were the first to set foot in this country, they were also the first to experience industrialization from their places of origin. And because of that, they were the first to set up a different economic, social, and political system in America. So, because of that, their actions are not only habitualized, they are also institutionalized. They attach the norms, their conventions in setting up all these new economic and political institutions. And because of that, voting practices has long been institutionalized based on the norms and conventions of the European immigrants. And because of that, later on, when African Americans, they also wanted to have the rights to vote, they literally have to fight for or strongly advocate for the rights to vote. Because this practice has been institutionalized by people who are different from them, who are from a different racial group. Are we clear? And I'm sure you still remember, we talk about institutionalized racism. This relates to the term institutionalization. Are we clear? Okay. Thomas theorem. Okay, if a kid believes that there's a boogeyman in the closet, the kid will be afraid to sleep in his or her bedroom. And the kid will go to the parents' room to sleep. So this is what we mean by the Thomas theorem. If the kid defines the situations are real, the consequences are real indeed. Okay, there's an incident, I think in Florida. It involved Zimmerman and the other guy, I don't remember. I don't know if you can recall. Apparently, an African American guy was walking around a Hispanic person's backyard. And that African American guy was perceived as someone with no good intention. It was a rainy day. He had dark clothes on. He had a hood on. He was coming back from a football game. Trayvon versus Zimmerman case. So, I think Trayvon was shot by Zimmerman because Zimmerman, he perceived somebody from another racial group walking around his backyard with a hood on, maybe in an evening, and it was dark because it was raining. Maybe he was up to no good. So for self-protection, he shot the guy. This is another manifestation of the Thomas theorem. Are we clear? Trayvon versus Zimmerman case. So, in this case, Zimmerman perceived the situation as real, and because of that, they are real in their consequences. Are we clear about the Thomas theorem? Okay. So, self-fulfilling prophecy is a false idea, a false ideology that can become true if you internalize all these ideologies. If certain group of people are being perceived as a certain way, if they internalize all these negative stereotypes, it becomes real. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Are we clear? Okay, I'm at the stopping point.